Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I would like to call the Curriculum and Instruction Committee meeting to order at 4:02. And the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. However, since we don't have a quorum, Suzanne, can we motion to table this? Or can we
Sure.
just table it?
I motion to table the minutes from August 23rd until we have a quorum to in fact approve those minutes.
Perfect. Thank you, Suzanne.
You're welcome.
And as far as I know, there were no public comments. Okay. Well, next up is our superstar. Dr. Pennington will talk about, he's our new assistant superintendent of schools. Yay. And he's going to tell us a little bit about the org chart, a little bit about, what he's doing, the introduction of the education administrator of curricula and professional development, and the education administrator of SRBI. Long time coming, yay. So Rob, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. And we also have the educational administrator for early childhood as well, school support and early childhood. So she'll be jumping on, Amaris Melendez as well. So the first piece, thank you for the introduction. Not a doctor yet, just.
Hey, I'm willing it. I'm willing it.
So I'm going to just share a quick presentation so that we can share a draft of the org chart so that you can see that. And then I will turn it over to our educational administrator for curricula to talk a little bit about some of the work that we have been working on so far throughout the summer and starting at the beginning of the school year. So give me 1 second. Gonna move this here. Share. All right, so this is just a quick draft so that you can see my role and then the different areas that fall under my role. So we have specialized instruction. We also have for school counseling and support services. And then we have our curricula and professional development. And we also have educational administrator for multilingual learners and world languages. And then the educational administrator for SRBI. So in terms of for curricula, I've broken it down a little bit further for you as a draft so that you can see this section of our team. We have Stacy Bergen, who is the educational administrator for curriculum professional development. And then she has 3 people that fall under her department. And that falls for the assistant educational administrator for mathematics and STEM. We have the assistant educational administrator for humanities, and then the assistant educational administrator for gifted and talented programs. So that falls into one bucket under curriculum and professional development. And then we have our educational administrator of SRBI, and she oversees our improvement teachers, our math and literacy improvement teachers. And then we have the educational administrator for multilingual learners and world languages. And then there's also an assistant, and we also have an instructional coach as well. So this kind of breaks down the curricula side of the entire is under the assistant superintendent of schools. So I wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to just share that piece. We are going to be cleaning it up and posting this information once it's finalized, but I know it's something that we've talked about, and I wanted to be able to provide some of that information so that you can see this end of under my role, so to speak. Now, the next piece that we talked about is we really wanted to talk about some of the curricular work that we're doing. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Stacy Bergen, who is our educational administrator for curriculum professional development.
Hi, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be in community with you here today. My role in the City of Norwalk is to really look at what is happening in and around the schools regarding the teaching and learning. So one of the things that we started with back in the sort of late spring, early summer was to really begin to look at and dig deeply into the current curricular programs. And what we realized is there wasn't coherence across the schools, and we wanted students to be able to have a similar experience. So whether they were at Rhoton or whether they were at Silvermine, that their experiences would be similar, so that if a family needed to move, for example, from one area to the next, and their child was to transfer schools, that it wouldn't be an entirely new experience for our kids. And so we began to sort of take a step back and look at sort of like what are the components of curricula. And so we look at this curriculum funnel as a guide to begin the work. So we have our scope and sequence. So we begin to look at like, what do we want our kids to look like when they leave Norwalk? So when we talk about being future ready and college ready, like what does that look like? And then chasing that all the way back to then, so if we have a kindergartner, what educational experiences do kindergartners need in order to get them through the trajectory of being college, career, and future ready? So we realigned our units of study across the district in order to have a more robust experience for kids K to 12. Once we get the scope and sequence down, we begin to think about the pacing guide. So how long will it take us in each unit of study in order to meet the goals and the intended outcomes? So sometimes it's 6 weeks, sometimes it's 8 weeks, sometimes it's 10 weeks. It all depends on what that final summative assessment is asking the kids to do. Then the members of the school communities, so teachers came together along with members of the central staff to develop the unit plans. And we had a number of new resources this year that we used to help us create the unit plans. We purchased Wonders as a structured literacy program late last spring. And we also coupled it with our school-wide resources in addition to all of the new books that we had purchased for the elementary school libraries. And we built those units of study around common themes so that kids could begin to dig deeper into content and really have a robust, I'm going to use that word a lot today, this robust learning experience. So the district office provides all three of those things, the scope and sequence, the pacing guides, and the unit plans. The real work, though, begins at the lesson plan level. And that's when our teachers begin to look at the three previous resources and figure out like, okay, so what does day-to-day instruction look like for the children in our community? In teams, teachers develop plans across departments, if it's at the middle school or high school level, and they begin to figure out how do we create these skill-based learning experiences so that we can, again, meet our intended outcome. Next slide. So one of the things that we started to use this year also was UBD, which is Understanding by Design. And it's a really great way to do what we call backwards plan, right? So if any of us have ever been on a road trip, we often figure out what our final destination is going to be, and then we figure out what the stops are along the route as we begin, either whether we're driving there or flying there or whatever it is, right? We start with the end in mind. So the end in mind for us is always kind of that summative assessment. Like we want to make sure that our kids are reading and writing a lot of different genres, not just one genre of study. And so we think about, okay, if we want kids to be reading and writing different genres, what are the standards that we need to utilize in order to get our kids to, again, to that end assessment? So we look at what are the standards we're going to be used. The state of Connecticut has identified 16 priority standards. And so we made sure that throughout the unit plans, those standards appear multiple times. So kids are getting their multiple exposures and multiple times of looking at learning activities. Then we look at our desired results. Again, what what skills are the kids going to be able to use in different content areas, in different areas of their life, right? So if we're talking, for example, about the skill of making inferences, right? Inferencing is a great skill that kids need, whether they're in kindergarten or whether they're in 12th grade. And the way that they can apply that skill to the outside life beyond the walls of the 4 classrooms is really important to us. Then we look at our assessment. So assessment is looking a little bit differently this year. We are using our common formative assessments at the school level, and then we're moving towards that big summative assessment that will take place at the end of the unit. We're trying to work towards less is more so that we can go deeper instead of having many different assessments throughout the
Daisy,
course of
I'm
a
sorry,
unit.
can I just ask a quick question? You
I'm
didn't say
sorry,
Common
Sherelle, you're
Core.
on mute.
Oh,
Sherelle, could you repeat that?
No, we can't. Cheryl, we can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Unmute, Sherelle.
what? Thank you, Roland.
There we go. That's
I
perfect.
just wanted to hear you speak. Um, Can you just repeat that? I thought I heard Common Core for the assessment.
Okay, so all of our standards are this Connecticut State Common Core standards.
Got it. Okay, I just
That is
wanted
what
to
we
make sure I
use.
heard correctly.
We use those standards to help us design what students are going to know and be able to do. So we use that as reference points, yes, in order to drive the assessment. So all of the assessments are standards aligned, right? So if we want to know that kids can write an argumentative essay, we're using the standards as our baseline to say, how are we going to get our students who know little or a lot about writing argumentative essays, and how are we going to get them to meet the standard?
Got it. Thank you.
Stacey, and you may cover this a little bit later, so stop me if I'm asking the question too early. But along the way, have teachers developed common formative assessments to give them an indicator if kids are going to be ready for the summative assessments?
So for the first unit, we developed, right? So the team over the summer developed one common formative assessment for each of the units to be given out as a midpoint in order to adjust instruction.
Okay. And
if we feel that there needs to be additional ones, we will add them to the unit plans. When we looked at the rate at which our students are being assessed over the course of the year, it's a lot.
Yes,
and we wanted to make sure that those assessments were really truly meaningful. So I've taken sort of a step back and said, they have we're doing NWA this year as well. We're having DIBELS as part of that. Plus we have our IABs and the SBAC. That's a lot of assessment, especially for our youngest learners. And so we really want to be able to sort of scaffold up the assessment instead of over assessment. Teachers on a daily basis, although not formalized in terms of here's a quiz or a test or a writing assignment, are assessing, and they're making instructional judgments and moves on a daily basis. Even if it has to do with regrouping children for the next day in order to reteach a content. So assessment is always ongoing. It's just not as formalized, in the traditional way of a test or a quiz. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, because that's really what I was asking about. I think we do an awful lot of testing, but I think the formative ones to before you get to doing a post-mortem on those big tests, the formative, right? Because that's really what they are once you get those results, right? Is the formative ones, that's where you're going to adjust your instruction along the way. So I wondered how that was fitting into the rewriting of the curriculum and looking at the standard. So so you did. I mean, teachers are going to be doing them. They're not standardized across the group, but teachers are going to be doing those kind of dipsticks along the way.
Yes.
Okay. And then my other question.
So also too, I wanted to address, Suzanne,
Yes.
something that we're doing new at the district this year too, is we're doing something called an all call, where we're asking at the end of the units for schools to provide a sample across their student population to the district office, so that the curricula team can take a step back and look at what are the student products, where are some gaps across the district in terms of what students know and are able to do, and that so that we can take that information and then adjust the future unit plans. So we're really trying to be proactive, and really beginning to think deeply about the teaching and learning that's taking place in our classrooms.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Next slide. Okay, so when we're thinking about the curricula across Norwalk, we think of sort of the big bucket content areas. And so in literacy, we have K-5 literacy units that are developed using Wonders and school-wide materials. Our middle school units of study were developed using school-wide materials. Our high school units of study, wow, there's a piece missing from the slide. Okay, are developed using the standards and the idea that we're building on the units of study in school-wide. So we are really being conscientious to make sure that we are providing a literacy experience for students that is going to be able to make them college and future career ready. In social studies this year, we developed new units of study using the Connecticut framework for grades K-5. In addition, revisions to the units of study in middle school happened as well over the summer, again, using that Connecticut framework. And they really focus on economics, geography, history, and civics. There's a new course mandated by the state of Connecticut on African American, Black, Puerto Rican, Latino studies at the high school level. And we will be piloting that class, that course at P-TECH in the spring. Any questions? Okay.
I guess for me, I'm glad to hear you've talked about rigorous a lot, that these new courses come in have to be really at the highest level to engage kids and talk to them where they are, because we want to make sure that they understand the importance of these classes in a way that it's a little bit late that we've come to be offering these, that I hope that it's a really robust curriculum.
Yes, thank you, Suzanne. Another thing that we are going to engage with that impacts all of the curricula in front of you today is this cycle of feedback. Oftentimes, the feedback or reflection is left to the end of the year in June, where we usually have like a teacher workshop week. And what I found in that workshop is like teachers couldn't remember, not for lack of like, you know, ability to remember, but like the year's overwhelming, right? So what we wanted to do is engage in teachers in a cycle of feedback around each unit at the culmination and asking them what went well. What do you think we need to sort of add? Is there something we need to drop? How are we going to tweak this? And we're going to be doing that in the moment. So that teachers, you know, their feedback is entered into the unit plans. And then in turn, we're not having to do that work in June. So when the end of school comes, teachers can just go on their way, you know, or maybe we use a small group, but that big sort of like monkey on our back saying like, oh, we have to do this. We're hoping to like mitigate that work a little bit. So thinking about like, how do we work smarter in terms of people's time, and also like doing it in the now.
And I'm sorry, I have so many questions. And then I guess my last question in social studies is the idea that the skills of reading and writing are being reinforced in a way at nonfiction level, fiction, you know, so that kids are able to write a coherent, you know, research paper and all those pieces. Is that very much part of the social studies curriculum?
Yes. And there will be additional further alignments throughout the course of the year. So for example, today I was meeting with a group of assistant principals and at the middle school level, and they were like, hey, this unit of study really aligns very specifically to social studies. And I said, yes. So how can we make those two departments begin to work more closely so that both teachers feel responsible, right? As reading teachers and writing teachers. The skill of reading and writing is not just left to that of the reading teacher. Every teacher across content levels, whether you're a math teacher, a science teacher, you are a reading teacher because students have to read in every single class. The skills may be different that they utilize, but they still need the access of language in order to be successful.
Thank you.
Okay, so
one of
moving
my
along.
biggest,
Oh, no, you
just
just
quickly-
need to
We
math.
have the illustrative mathematics program for grades K through 12 as well. That is a
Stacey,
problem-based core
hello,
program
can
designed to
anybody hear
address
me?
content and practice standards to foster learning for all. It's a little bit of a shift
Stacy,
from sort
I'm
of the
sorry
way
to
that maybe
interrupt.
I learned math in school,
Yeah.
but it really, this ability for kids to tackle complex problems and really
Rob,
work
is she
through
not
them
hearing
will
us?
give them, again, the skills necessary to enter middle school at a more competitive level, to enter high school at a more competitive level, and then, you know, in terms of college again and career. So we really wanted to be able to make that shift. We piloted it in a bunch of schools last year, and we will continue to support them throughout the rollout in this coming year. Our science curriculum is aligned to the NGSS. It's a hand-on, phenomenon-based exploratory model, again, in grades K through 12. Our art programs were developed by teachers alongside of the Connecticut performance standards. And finally, I know, you know, a big issue, and although social emotional learning isn't necessarily a curricula per se, but it is the work of this district to begin to embed social emotional learning into many areas as possible. So that's across contents, that is at multiple times during the day. Like SEL doesn't just happen like, you know, from like 9 to 9:30 on Wednesdays. We really are working towards getting teachers to understand that we are socially, emotionally responsive to our learners all throughout the day, not just during circle time or not just during advisory, but it's embedded in those daily lesson plans so that all students have similar experiences.
Stacy, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, because we couldn't, Ms. Harris was going to ask a question. And so I just want to make sure. Sherelle, would you like to ask your question?
Can she hear us now? Is she amenable to us asking the question?
I think that she can hear now. I'm wondering if
So it
maybe
was more of a comment, not necessarily a question, because I know
Okay.
we're short of time. But Suzanne brought up the point of students being able to write a nice report. And that's been one of my biggest issues, is the way writing is taught or actually not taught. So I hope that that's being addressed in curriculum, because I will tell you, mine came home with grades and I'm like, I wouldn't have even given you a D on that. And she would have to rewrite it over to my standards. And I'm just hoping that writing, because it's a very important skill as far as communication. And sometimes when, you know, people can't see you, that's your only form of communication. So I'm really hoping that it's being addressed honestly at the elementary level.
So I can answer that. All of the summative assessments in K to 5, actually in K through 11, are writing summative assessments in which students will demonstrate their knowledge about reading and about content through the means of writing. So yes, we are beginning to adjust that writing curricula as well, and working very closely with our consultants to get teachers to the point where they are taking kids really through the writing cycle, doing a lot of model lessons, allowing students the ability to revise and edit in an ongoing process.
Thank you.
I also wanted to just add is that in elementary school, we our new Wonders materials and school-wide writing are both infused. And so there is writing incorporated into our daily literacy block. So, and we've really made a conscientious effort to prioritize writing
That is so
starting
important.
in kindergarten and working our way up, so that as students develop throughout their time in Norwalk Public Schools, their writing is growing. And so there's specific units and genres that they'll be writing about throughout every single school year that they're with us.
That's so important. Thank you.
Agree, but and I'd like to, when there's time, maybe today's not the day, but we have never had kind of an in-depth conversation about illustrative mathematics. We were going
Yes.
to in the past, but if you think I'm insane about, and I agree, the writing, I don't think we've ever been as explicit in our writing instruction. My kids are much older than Sherelle's, but I mean, I remember them both saying, you know, you math people have so many rules. Why don't they just explain to us when you use a colon? Why do they just keep writing on the paper and we're supposed to guess what they mean? So I'm glad to hear we're doing that with the writing. But I'd really like to hear more about illustrative
illustrative.
mathematics. I don't know if we have time today.
I think,
We
but I
won't
think
have time, but I think we've been trying to do that for what, 4 months now, Suzanne? And we've just never got to it. So Rob, the next time we speak, I think we should delve into maybe just devote one whole meeting to illustrative math.
absolutely. I think that that's a great idea to dive in a little bit deeper and see that continuum, because it starts in kindergarten and we're working our way all through high school. So we definitely
Perfect.
will.
Thanks for
add
that reminder,
component.
Suzanne.
All right, so I'm going to transition because I think our next piece is really to dive into SRBI. Now that we
Yes,
have
yes,
an
yes.
educational administrator who oversees SRBI, Dr. Perry, and
Yay.
I will let her just talk a little bit about some of the work that since she's joined our team, some of the work that she has done. The one piece I want to add about curricula before we transition, I just didn't want to forget, is that we have put parent guides onto the Norwalk Public Schools website so that parents can access and see the different units that we're working through in literacy and in mathematics, so that if parents have questions, they can go and really look at the parent guide. I think it's an important piece for the communication with our families.
Right, and Rob, we're going to see a little bit of that, right? Of the portal?
Yes, we can
Okay.
we can take some time and show a couple things, because Dr. Perry also has a couple
okay.
things as an SRBI
Perfect.
portion of the website for our families as well. And it's a start. We're going to be developing it more as we're adding more throughout the year. So I just
Okay.
want to make sure that this is not the final product. These are things that are going to be morphing and we're going to be adding to throughout the entire school year. And it's just, we wanted to start by sharing what is SRBI and just a little bit more information. And so as we add different levels of complexities, we're working on a handbook, finalizing a handbook and things of that nature. We'll start to add more to our website for families to be able to access, because we think that that's really important.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Perry, I'm going to turn over the floor to you.
Great. So thanks, Rob, for the great segue. So as you guys said, scientific research-based intervention is super important. And we have a whole new approach that we're using this year. So not only is it important for Connecticut, but obviously it's a state mandate that's necessary. So we are approaching it a little differently for this school year, K to 8, where all schools have a 30-minute intervention block or enrichment block. And this block of time will be used for direct instruction for students who need that extra support with the universal curriculum, and also the quality instruction to provide for the group enrichment for others. So we're working on using that SRBI handbook as that resource to really help build it out, like Rob said, and you know, really use it as a guide to help guide us as how it's going to be formed. So to support rolling this out, this vision with integrity, I have met with all the building leaders at this time. So I've gone to go to every school and meet with them. We've also expanded that SRBI team. So we've gotten to include some new teachers, so literacy and math improvement teachers who are going to be supporting that tier 2 for those tier 2 students that are flagged at the K-8 level. So they will be providing intervention curriculums that are identified as intervention needs. And these improvement teachers will use that triangulation of data like Stacy was just talking about. So we're going to use those cognitive formative assessments, those universal screeners, and some of our state test scores to really look and analyze who requires supports. And looking back to those general education teachers to really see who would be identified and really what the needs are. So this team at that building level is going to be collaborating with all those professionals and providing that pull out and push out support appropriately through monthly training. And Rob, you can go to the next slide.
May I ask a question, Debbie, first?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I just want to be sure I understand. So that 30 minutes every day is for tier 2 instruction?
Yep. So tier 1 students will remain in the classroom. We're going to be doing small group, but direct instruction provided in the classroom, sometimes using enrichment, maybe going into more in depth on some of those universal curriculums. But it will be done in that sense. And then that tier 2 will be pulled out with the improvement teachers in the math or literacy realm to get that support. And I'm saying tier 2 at this time because we're working on obviously completing that tier 2 with integrity to make sure that we're following through on that to then move on to the next steps of that SRBI process.
Thank you.
And I just want to add to that, if it's all right, and I'm sorry to just interject, that we really want to make sure that we are supporting all learners, and that when we're looking at this block of time, we're looking at providing these intervention supports for students who need that extra level of support, and also students who need enrichment opportunities to provide those as well. So it really is an all hands on deck approach to support our students across different grade levels.
Great, thanks, Rob. So also we're going to include monthly trainings for those improvement teachers and coaches to help provide them with some assistance for running out some of those programs, analyzing data, really looking at, the SRBI process and making sure that it is run as smoothly as possible. And currently students are in that universal screener window. So we are looking at those spring test scores, but then we're also gathering that data now and really seeing where those students lie. And then that next piece is, as I just said, we're using that handbook that was previously created to really implement this process and really looking at that. So as a district, we have some of those new programs to support those students with that intervention need. And once the team at the school has their tier 2 students, parents will obviously receive a letter if they need that pull-out support and will be communicated from the school. As Rob said, we have built up that website, just a little start because we're working on, building out that system. And I don't know if it's helpful, Rob, if you want me to share my screen or.
May I just butt in again?
Yeah,
Sorry.
absolutely. Yeah, no, you're totally all good.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I know it's very early in the school year, so you may not know the answer to this, but do you feel confident, Debbie, that you have enough intervention teachers at this point for them to be able to support all the kids that are doing that 30-minute pull out on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I think, you just approached it. We are going to be doing that pull out with the tier 2 of the highest need, but we are going to be assessing that. And obviously through the SRBI process, it's a cycle. So students might not need that intense support as pull out, and they might be able to receive it a little bit as push in through a tier 1, more of an, support in that classroom, or they might need more of that small support in a more rigorous. When we talk about that tier 2 support, we don't talk about it daily either. We talk about it for 2 to 3 days a week. So that also helps us build some more of that out. And like Rob said, we have a all hands on deck approach. So we have a lot of different programs that we're really looking at our specialists and seeing who would be best to run that kind of a program and has that specialty. We are, like you said, in the early stages of looking at that intervention block and leading it out, but I am confident that it is working out in the best way, and meeting with the schools and really tiering it to their needs has been really effective.
Good, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So can you see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. So I just wanted to just do a quick talk. So if you were to go to academics on our website, you can click on our new SRBI tab of the website. And this is where we will be adding more information as we go. And right now we have a quick overview of SRBI. And then the state has provided an SRBI guidebook. And so we have that there for our families where you can go and you can click. We have it in English and in Spanish. And then we also just have a quick infographic just explaining the different tiers of instruction. And so that is, and then also we have Dr. Perry's contact information. Now, once our SRBI handbook is finalized, that will be added. Once we have some of our like tier 2 programs and things that we're using, we're going to be updating this website throughout the year. This year is really one of the things Dr. Perry has been able to do is she's been able to get into all of our buildings and meet with the administrators to kind of assess some of the systems that are in place and to provide some best support for our schools. So this is, like I said, she's joined our team and we're building out this system. We have PD that we're providing with our reading and writing improvement teachers and our math improvement teachers that really is around these interventions and supports. And then they are bringing those back to their buildings as well. So we're really building out this robust system of SRBI. I think that we've had pockets of SRBI, but now we really are coordinating a district-wide initiative.
This looks really good. I mean, it looks informative and definitely the aesthetics visually is very nice too.
Any questions for Dr. Perry? Because I do think one of the things we talked about is some of the work with dyslexia at the state, and from a district standpoint, one of the biggest components for our districts is the level of assessment, progress monitoring through the work of SRBI. And so this is really going to help us to target these areas of need as they come up in our schools. And so the fact that we have in all of our buildings reading and writing improvement teachers and even literacy coaches really is going to help us to really check students who are maybe struggling to provide these interventions and supports early, so that someone's not going through Norwalk Public Schools and not being identified. So this is a really key component for us as a district to help support that initiative. And so I just wanted to, we also, and that's why before we transition, the other thing that we're doing as a district is we've made a real conscious effort to provide letters training. And that's why Amaris Melendez has joined us. She's been our point person for this training. And it really is around the science of reading. And so if you have any questions for Dr. Perry, you can ask them. If not, we will move on to the next portion.
So Rob, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so are we going to talk about the Public Act 21-168?
Well, I mean, I think that in terms, a lot of that public act is around higher education requirements.
Mhm.
Like it's requiring our teachers that are in school to get extra training in their in their certification requirements. As a district, one of the areas that we're highlighting is the SRBI, which we
Of
just
course.
talked about. And then we're going to talk about supporting that through the letters training that we're providing. And then I'll add in some other components when Ms. Melendez is finished around just our literacy clinic, because we have an
Got it.
amazing literacy clinic as
Mhm.
well. And so I'll talk a little bit about that, but we also have our reading and writing improvement teachers. We have our literacy coaches, which has been a district initiative to support some of that work.
Gotcha.
So,
We going to talk about Orton Gillingham anywhere in here too?
yep, that's from our literacy clinic.
Okay, perfect.
No
I just wanted to, for Public Act 21168, just for the record, for anyone who's watching, for them to know exactly what it is, or even for teachers who may be considering coming to our district, or I guess anywhere, since it's a public act, just for people to know exactly what it is. So well, we have it listed here as an act implementing recommendations to analyze the implementations of laws governing dyslexia instruction and training. And that's, I mean, it's very broad. So I don't know if you want to break it down in layman's terms, and then we can just move on.
Sure. So I'll just give a quick, just some of the impact of the law. It's just higher ed requirements to include structured literacy courses, which I do think is something that that's for our pre-service educators. And then new teacher certification requirements are impacted because they are going to have to get extra courses in that realm. And then we're looking, like I said, part of our goal is around the science of reading and training our current teachers as well, which is not part of the act, but we know that it's an important piece for us to support our practitioners. And that's where the letters training that we're going to transition to. And then it also establishes an Office of Reading and Dyslexia in the State Department of Education to guide and monitor the work. And then the State Department is also identifying a required reading assessment to be given in grades K through 3 as screening and progress monitoring measures. And we're a priority school district, so we're already required to give that assessment. There's a couple different ones that we can use. And so this year we are using DIBELS as our K-3 assessment. And that's also what we're using as our progress monitoring tool. So that's like the big components of the act. It has a lot of impact on higher education and preparing teachers before they come into the field. But we also know that as a district, we need to make a conscientious effort to support our current practitioners that are in the field. And so that's where I'm going to transition to our letters training.
Okay, and just one more thing before Amiris comes on. Amiris, I'm sorry. I've been trying to understand, like, how do we as a district, do we have a limit or a grade by which we know whether someone's dyslexic or not? Is it like by third grade? Is it by second grade? Like, do we have anything or I hate to use the word willy-nilly, but that's just the word that comes to mind. But I think for me, it should be at least by third grade before they transition to learning to read and reading to learn. So I don't know, but you don't have to answer that. That's something that I would just love for us to at some point formalize, but just something for you to keep on your back burner.
Okay.
So that I know Amiris has been waiting, so I won't take up more time. Look at that smile. So I'll be quiet now.
Oh, no worries. Thank you so much. I just wanted to add that that act is a very important piece of legislative because it's really going to better prepare teachers as they enter our school communities and to support our students, because many of us, myself included, didn't get courses in higher ed or teacher prep programs that really taught into how children learn to read, right? And how explicit reading instruction is so important, especially for those younger years where children are making those brain connections between this, the different hemispheres of the brain. And so I think it's very important for the future. And for our district, we are bringing in, or we have brought in letters, which is not to be confused with a program. It's not a curriculum. What letters is a series of professional learning for pedagogues that really teaches into the science of reading. Okay, it teaches all about tools and knowledge that teachers can use to inform their classroom practice, to help understand who their children are as readers, and to help provide that explicit instruction that is going to help build those connections and help them move along the reading continuum. So we have rolled out our first cohort in July. And so all our 12 elementary schools are represented in this cohort. We have our literacy coaches that are participating. We have our reading and writing improvement teachers that are participating. And we also have classroom teachers, again, for all of our 12 elementary schools in this cohort. And so you can see a schedule of our dates. Letters is a mix of 3 components. We have live trainings where we bring everybody together. We have an independent coursework where teachers engage on the online platform and do some independent readings and watch videos. And then we have a bridge to practice component, which is where the pedagogues take all their learning and apply it to the work that's happening in the classroom with students. And so the goal of bringing letters in is absolutely to build the capacity of teachers, to help them see where the learning needs are. In some cases, teachers will be able to see some behaviors that might be able to identify students who have dyslexia, right? And so this is, all put in place to just better support our teachers and ultimately, promote positive student outcomes in reading and writing for everybody. And also what we would like to do is have this cohort trained, and then those teachers and coaches can then train others so that we have a sustained system, right, in order to help build capacity across the school. So for cohort 2, this will begin in January, and it will consist of our middle school and high school instructional coaches, improvement teachers, and it may include our multilingual learner teachers and our specialized instruction teachers as well. So, this is very exciting work for us. It is a college level course. So there's a lot of information that teachers are engaging in. And, we're going to partner up and support each other along the way. And as we, move across the cohorts, we'll kind of come together and plan for what it will look like after these 2 cohorts get to experience the learning and apply those learnings to their classroom communities and schools. Also, our leaders were able to engage in a high-level overview of what this looks like in terms of the teacher instruction and how it will look in the classroom. And so this was offered to principals and our CISDs and assistant principals back in April. We also will offer it again in the spring of this year, just to help leaders see what their look-fors are in the classroom with the teachers who have been trained. And yep. Are there any questions around that? And I just wanted one other detail. Every concept and skill that is taught in letters is solidly based in scientific research. And it gives a deep understanding on how reading and language acquisition works. So aligned to the science of reading and really designed to help build the capacity with our teachers, coaches, and reading and writing improvement teachers, so that they can then turn over that knowledge to their communities.
And the other piece that I just wanted to add, so I mean, we've been very strategic around providing this type of training to our practitioners, but we also have our literacy center in Norwalk that supports students, but also the real role of that center is to support our practitioners and to really coach them around the work that's happening. So one of our I want to say coaches, but one of our people that work out of the literacy center is an OG trained fellow. And so we've been having other teachers. Last year, we had a cohort of teachers that were trained in OG practices, and that was throughout the year. And it was a really great opportunity. And many of those people are some of our interventionists that are improvement teachers. And these are they're highly skilled in the science of reading, but they're constantly learning and adding to their repertoire so that they can continue to grow to support our students as they are going through Norwalk Public Schools. And this is not something that I would say a few years ago we were as deeply committed to, but now we have this solid commitment into learning all of these skills so that we can support our students wherever they are, because I think one of the most important pieces is that we're meeting students where they are and we're helping them grow as learners.
So I have a question, and thank you for all of this. It shows that you're really paying attention to incredibly important things and having a real priority for reading and writing and mathematics. And so there's new curriculum, there's learning about the science of reading, there's lots of train the trainer models. Are teachers really being given the time that they need to learn all this new stuff? I think we always have to be cognizant of the adult learner and how many new things they can do on top of all the things that we ask them to do on a daily basis. How are you feeling with the pulse of that they're feeling that they can, first of all, learn all this, teach it to somebody else, make sure that everybody really understands it, introduce a new curriculum, be writing, new lesson plans based on new unit plans? How are you feeling that that's being managed at the building level?
I'm going to have Stacy talk a little bit about this. One of the pieces that I will say is that we really are investing in our teacher team time, because I do think one of the things that I would always say is that the smartest person in the room is the room, and it's the collective of the team. And so I think that that's something that we have been making an investment in, is building our team's capacities, and that will help everyone. But I'll let Stacy kind of talk a little bit about some of that work, because there is new curricula that we are rolling out, and that is something that is happening. And that's part of the reason why our team has said that we're going to do an all call and we're going to adjust based on your feedback, so that at the end of the year, it's not something that we're pulling everyone together to try and say, remember what happened in unit 1? And they're like, no, I don't. So, but go ahead, Stacy.
Okay, so I remember a long time ago, one of my department chairs said to me, one of the best things about September is that everything was new again in terms of teaching, right? And so there is a lot of new stuff that we are rolling out within the district. But I think in my heart of hearts and what I know is like right and just for children, these changes had to happen, right? We needed to make sure that all of our children who sit in our classrooms are experiencing similar learning activities, right? And then working towards that common goal. And so unfortunately, like in order to do that, we had to like peel back the onion and start to look at like what wasn't working and then make some strategic decisions on like what possibly could work better. So, you know, having a lot is not always the best answer, but I do have to say that the teachers across the district have sort of embraced this change and have owned the challenge of really thinking about how can I become a better pedagogue so that I can support the kids who sit in front of me. That being said, we started to institute teacher teams in the schools. And what so the way we used to have data teams, and data teams were very strategic in looking at like very standardized results and not so much the sort of the day to day or like the week to week kind of work that happens in schools. And so we wanted to be able to build these teams of teachers who could really look intimately at the instruction that's happening, right? So looking at student work, seeing where the gaps in learning are, and then being able to make those adjustments as a team. So if Amaris and I were on the same team and we were looking at a piece of student work, right, an assessment, and I was like, wow, Amaris, your kids have like outscored my kids. What are you doing in your classroom? Can I come and visit you? Can I see what strategies and structures you're putting in place so that maybe I can learn and then bring that back to my classroom and try that with my kids? Oftentimes what would happen is teachers would become frustrated and they'd be like, I don't know what to do. And there's the answer oftentimes is right next door. And so we want to build these relationships among teachers to see each other as like trusted individuals, as people who know stuff. And then coupled with that is the instructional coaches and the reading, writing improvement teachers also being active members of those teams, and the assistant principals and the principals sort of popping in and out to sort of like take the pulse, or Suzanne, you use the word like dipstick, right? To get this idea of like what's happening in particular grades and then across the school so that we can identify trends, so that we can do something like letters training came about from conversations about realizing that teachers, even coming out of some of the top, institutions across this country, were not trained reading teachers. And that's where Sherelle, so like to get back like to like this idea of like Orton Gillingham or Reading Recovery or any of those like very specific and specialized literacy programs, they weren't trained in any of that. Phonics for a long time and structured literacy was not taught in schools for like the last 20 years. It's only now within kind of like the last 2 years that people are starting to say, you know what, kind of like what was old is new again. We had this and it worked. So why did we leave it? And so we're sort of circling back to like what we know worked. Like the one room schoolhouse, it worked. Immigrants that came here and attended those schools, they learned how to read and write English. There was something right that those teachers were doing. And for some reason, like in the late 80s, we abandoned it. And now we're circling back, right? So I am so incredibly proud that the teachers are owning this challenge, that the district is owning this challenge, that we are trying to tackle learning in a way that's going to create better situations for our kids. And in the end, it's always the kids that matter the most. So if we have to plan an extra 45 minutes a day, or night, or take some extra papers home, I say in the end, when it comes to graduation and when it comes to promotions, and when we see Johnny, who's a different kid from September to June, I say it's all worth it. And I think that speaks volumes to the dedication of the teachers of the city of Norwalk.
Thank you. Suzanne, before we close out, do you have any other questions?
Nope, I'm good. Thanks, Sherelle.
I do have a question. So, we start things, Suzanne had sort of mentioned, like we're introducing quite a few things. My bottom line are the scores, and not even so much the scores, but making sure that the kids are retaining things in their long-term memory. So with all the things that we're implementing this school year, about how long do you think it will take before we see the improvements in the students?
Can I try to tackle that?
Yeah, and briefly, if you
That's a
could,
big question,
It is a
right?
big, that's a
So,
big question.
Yeah, I mean, so any change we know takes sort of anywhere between like 3 to 5 years. Not idealistic when we're thinking like we want scores to improve like now. Like I get that, right? But I think once we fall into like a pattern of reflection and revision, then we will be able to begin to see the progress at like the immediate level. Like maybe it's at the grade level, then maybe it's at the school level, then maybe it's like at multiple schools, and then in terms of like across the district. So some learning gaps will be shrunken sooner. Larger learning gaps may take a little bit longer. I mean, I don't have like a definitive answer. I wish I did, because students learn and grow and change at different rates. But we hope to see, based upon the assessments, sort of definite improvements, obviously from September, well, end of September through June, right? But the one thing I wanted to say, Sherelle, is like what we did is we used to have 6 units in English and 6 units in social studies. And what we did was we sort of shrunk it back a little bit to dive deeper into content, so that kids had a longer time to learn content, instead of sort of trying to get like as much as we can. So oftentimes kids, families, teachers felt like they were like the gerbil on the wheel, just trying to get through the 6 to 8 weeks. And we said, well, why are we doing this? Like we can make decisions for our kids. It's going to work in the best interest. So, I'm hopeful that we're going to see growth over the next 3 to 5 years. And I'm hopeful that we're going to see direct impact between September and June. What that's going to be, I can't measure yet, but I know that I know that everyone knows that it has to happen. And we're really working towards having it happen and providing teachers and our larger school community with a multitude of tools in order to make it happen.
Yeah, and I think that that was a great answer. I do think that from an impact standpoint, that's something we're going to be monitoring throughout this year. And we really are hoping to see some of that impact happen this year. But in terms of long-term impact, I do think it will take a little while as we're building our system. But I don't know that long, but I really think that we're building this strong and coherent system, right? And with strong SRBI, will be able to support students and identify and make those adjustments as needed. And with strong tier 1 instruction, we'll be able to support our students, all students in the classroom. And so I think that it's one of the things I think that we are really looking to is it's not just we're doing this and we're done. It's this continuous improvement cycle. And that's something that we take very seriously, is that we're constantly assessing the work that we're doing and seeing, okay, this worked really well, but what are we going to adjust as we go through the time? When we see our beginning of the year data, okay, so what does this mean? And then based on some of those strategies, what happens at the middle of the year data? And did we see a positive change from BOY to MOY? And so we're going to constantly be looking at those pieces throughout the entire year.
wonderful. So my favorite 2 words for today are progress monitoring and tier 2 interventions. Those are my favorite 2 words for today. So Suzanne, do you want a motion or do you want me to motion for adjournment?
I'll make a motion to adjourn this meeting. Thank you for all that you taught us today.
And all the work, and thank the teachers too, because this is a lot on them. So please thank the teachers from us. So we have a motion to adjourn by Suzanne at 5:05. And I guess I'll second it. And thank you all.
Thank
See
you.
you next month.
Thank
See you
you.
next month.
All right. Take